And I'll be on time for a change. I'm always late, always late. And it's because of this tech thing, by the time you get it right, it's like 5:35. Okay, I think we are on now. Let's see.
Yeah, it is live streaming. Okay, yes. There it is.
Yeah, I might just have to mute your phone.
Oh yeah, I'll do that.
So that there's no feedback. Oh, how come I can't find myself?
Okay. Okay.
You got it?
Okay. Yeah, it should be. Okay, I think so. But
Okay,
I
cool.
did it, so.
All right, yes, I see you did it. Okay, cool. So let's start then. It's a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you're sitting in the world. It's another welcome to another edition of Live Chats on Monday with your host, Ronald Muringai. And today we have a fabulous guest, a former alma mater of mine. We went to the same university. She is now selling out at UCT. Her name is Professor Salome Maswime. How are you this evening, ma'am?
I'm good. I'm good. Very happy to be here with you.
Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate. Now, I was looking at your Wikipedia. Hey, man, you have a Wikipedia page. Hey, like you've arrived. No, could you know that person nowadays? So,
one day I woke up and I decided, let's see what's on my Google, and I found a Wikipedia page, and I think,
serious?
yeah.
So you didn't get someone to set it up for you, potentially some PR person?
No.
Wow.
And I was
No.
impressed with the accuracy and the time whoever it was took to put it together. So yeah.
Now I'm so glad about that. Congratulations on that. And I think I was looking at that and I'm seeing your number of titles and the number of awards that you've won. I feel privileged and honored to know you. But I'm thinking now, how does it feel to be you, to be in such a space where you're so young and you've done so much, on a global perspective, and actually have been rewarded with all these awards by your peers? How does that make you feel, at such a tender age?
So it's I mean, on one hand it's exciting. The acknowledgement is always exciting. It's wonderful, it keeps me going on, but on the other hand, I'm fighting real things, it's their real there are real issues. Maternal mortality is still there, issues of social justice, issues of women, gender, in leadership, all of those things.
Yeah.
So I think whilst it's exciting and you want to enjoy the moment while you can, but you always have your sobering moment where you realize that you've just only started. There's a lot more that still needs to be done, and I think I prefer to stay in that other bubble where you know that there's still a lot more work to be done, because that pushes me to keep going.
And I think that kind of summarizes, in essence, what a lot of people tend to think of academics, that they work in such a bubble that's disconnected somewhat from reality. And I'm trying to think, I'm sure it's something that you've heard again and again and again. Now, balancing those two, and obviously the passions that you have, and trying to be effective as a researcher, as an academic, how do you manage to do that? I mean, of course, coming back home, having a family kind of really also helps in doing that. But how do you manage to delineate the two and know that, okay, this time is here, that time is there?
I think what I try to do is be real and be a real person that's reachable, that's available, and not sit in that I'm an award winner kind of thing, or I'm in a professor type of, I always say, even to my students, call me by my first name. Don't call me Prof, because I don't like the walls that you can create around yourself so that people don't get to reach the real person. And the thing is, when you stay in that box, you're not up to date and clued up with what's happening in the real world. And so I like to keep myself in spaces with people where I have a reasonable grasp of what people are going through, what's happening, and living in the reality rather than living in the shadow of the achievements that I've had.
Sure. And I think for me, that's actually where I thought it would be good to have you on the show so we can at least speak to those things that are real to you, because I see one of the things that comes up, it pops up on your Wikipedia page there, excuse us, is that you kind of got inspired to go further in this and to do a lot more work in this particular department where you find yourself as a result of some deaths that you see. Tell us more about that. What happened there, and how did it bring you to where you are now?
Yeah. So as you'll know, back in medical school, I mean, I was very passionate about arts and drama, and I thought that's where my life was gonna go. And even when I went into internship as a young doctor, I really thought, I wanna do other things, performance studies, get out of, the whole medical thing. But pretty soon, working as a young doctor, I started seeing, you become the doctor that's there, that signs off the death. You do the CPR, you sign off the death certificate, you have to explain to the family what happened. And you have your moment where you ask yourself that, did it have to end up this way? And I think being in that space where I felt as a system, we could have done better for our patients. We could have, if we had access to this patient could have still been alive. I think those are the things that drove me to move into this field and to specialize, first of all, and to be passionate about issues of maternal, improving maternal care, but realizing later that it's not just in some villages outside, in some rural areas, but these are issues that affect a lot of Africans across different parts of the continent. And so I think doing research, looking at maternal mortality across different countries in the continent, that was very sobering and also made me realize that we've got bigger problems than I realized when I was a young doctor. But I felt I'm in a place where I could use my skills, my voice, my research to advocate for these things and to do research that could actually improve outcomes.
And I think you're perfectly placed to be the person to do that, having lived the experience, because I think sometimes we kind of tend to depend or see research coming from people that don't really have a connection to the thing that they're passionate about. It's almost like a career and a job. Whereas for you're trying to really solve issues that you've seen on the ground at home. And as somebody that grew up in Limpopo, which is next door to Zimbabwe, which by the way is the most fabulous country in Africa, I'll just drop it out there. How did your relationship with your dad and your mom almost help to shape you to become this person driven that as you are today, and trying to achieve these great goals that you're trying to chase after on this particular time?
Yeah. So I think there were two things growing up. One was having parents that inspired me, and I think especially, my father being an academic, him, having occupied some senior positions, very senior positions in universities, that was the one thing that inspired me. And I really felt when I grow up, I want to be an academic. I want to have an impact. I want my society, my community to respect the work that I do, and I want to make a difference. But also I had parents who believed in me. And I mean, I think I was in grade 1 when my mom said, this one is going to be a doctor. This one is going to do great things. So from childhood, that validation, affirmation, having parents who just said, we believe in you, keep going, and they've never stopped. I'm 37 today, and they are still saying, we believe in you, keep going, so it's I think it's been incredible to have parents who inspire you, but also who continue to push me and believe in the things that I believe in.
And you spoke earlier, touched earlier on something that's important, that I think our society is in a place where there's still issues that have to be dealt with in terms of the gender imbalance, the gender pay gap and the gender-based violence and all these things that really separate us. And actually growing up in this very patriarchal society and still working in it today, I'm trying to think, what are the things, perhaps besides, of course, the affirmation that you spoke about, comes a lot, I think, in my book as well on fatherhood and parenthood. What are the things that you think we should be telling to our girls, but specifically our girl children, to make them a bit more a bit more desiring of greater things in life, instead of just get an apron, start cooking, and get married to a rich man?
Yeah. And I think also, looking back at my past and childhood, and one of the things at home, we were more girls than boys. And I always, reflect on that, in that, the way that my father treated us now, sometimes I think he treated us like boys, in that, there was never a time where he made anyone made it feel like this is for boys and this is for girls. It was always go for it, go be the top of your class, be this, be whatever, be anything that you want to become. And I never ever felt limited by my gender, or by, or by my race, even growing up in 94, that was when I was in, having to go to a school where I was now the first Black person in the school. And, it was, the school had to have a meeting to discuss that we've had an application from Black parents. Are we going to accept this child?
Wow.
And I was that child that was going there. So things like that, I never ever felt I'm limited because of the color of my skin, because of or my age or anything. And I think those are the things that parents can instill in their children, to say, keep going, rather than simply teaching your kids how to say no. I laugh about it now, because you see these things in adulthood as well, when we've been constantly, ladies who've been constantly told, say no, say no, say no. You invite them to join a board and they say no to you. And then you're like, but we're trying to get women occupying spaces. So I think how our parents teach us, and what they teach us, and how comfortable they make us feel as who we are, with the gifts and talents we have, gives us the liberation to go and exercise those things that are inside of us. So yeah.
No, that's good. And looking at obviously your life as well, you are a mother, you are a wife, you are an aunt, you are a daughter, and you've actually managed to go through this entire pregnancy process twice so successfully as well. You've got these young boys growing up, Taurai and Tendai, and now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, how did you think the balance has to come in, therefore, to try and bring up the girl child and let her know that you can be and do whatever it is that you want, but you can also have a successful career, and you can also balance that with motherhood. It's almost of a tough thing. I think the one person I spoke to a bit earlier was saying they had to spend years trying to build their career. And so they almost forgot, they went for, forgot the whole family root thing and getting married and settling down and having children. Now, how did you successfully manage to do the both of those things?
Yes, and it's work in progress. It's constantly work in progress, and I think having a husband who has been immensely supportive, who has been from day one, when I thought, okay, this is where I see my life going, and he was like, no, I see you going further, and let's do that, let's push. Way before I signed up, or way before I did my PhD, my husband had long told me that, you know what, I see you doing a PhD one day, I see you becoming an academic, and it's been a very supportive journey. Now, at some point in our life, we knew that I got married young. I mean, we met in varsity. I was 19 years old when we got into a relationship. We got married, I was 23. And so the first few years, I think about 5 years, first 5 years, we knew we were not ready to have kids. We're still looking, okay, specialize, do this, do that. And so we had to do that juggle to say, okay, we need to get certain things right before we have our kids. But you can't wait forever. I think I was starting to approach 30, and I knew that, okay, at some point, you have to start planning ahead and thinking of the family. And at that point, we welcomed having kids in our life as, they are part of the bigger picture. It's not we should stop our lives to look after them, but how are they part of our story? Let's create our story together as a family, and let's see where it goes. And I think that's what we've always tried to do. So I fell pregnant whilst I was specializing. I got into trouble for it at work, where I was asked, why are you pregnant? You at this time of your life, couldn't you have waited another 2 years or so? And like, I couldn't have, and then later it was during my PhD. So the timing was never right. Professors who were blatant to say, this is not fitting into the plan and program we have for you. But we had to make it work and balance and help each other. But I think more than anything, we decided this is going to be part of our story, because when we do it right, it's going to liberate other women as well to do it right, so that they're not waiting to do their masters, their PhDs, or to follow their careers till they're in their 40s, 50s. But let us do it all together at this time and see. Hopefully we succeed. And if we do, others can also learn, and maybe more women will try the same thing.
And look, there's already that challenge on the corporate side of life anyway, and academically, clearly, where there almost has to be a good spot or a good space in your time schedule as a woman to fall pregnant. And I think that's just ridiculous in itself. We cannot be dictating when and how you should be falling pregnant as a woman. Now, you've fallen pregnant twice, again, you've gone through the journey. I think, what are the salient aspects? Because I know, of course, in terms of the scientific side of things, hey, you are the boss of the plus, sure. But when you look at the salient side of things, the support from your husband that you spoke about, and the family around you during that entire period when your hormones are going up and down, and I'm sure Kundo is waiting for a third child, if I spoke to him. But what kind of support do you think should be thus available to a woman who, juggling all of that, must still now go back home to potentially somebody who she has to now cook for and do all of these things?
And I think more than anything was the fact that, much as I may have had all the textbook knowledge on pregnancy, the real experience was not what I imagined it would be. And second time around, it was even worse than, So pregnancy is very different from what we all make it out to be, from what we all imagine. It's a time where you're anxious, you're afraid, you're excited, things may go right, things may go wrong, and things do go wrong at some points. And I think there isn't enough emphasis in how us as gynecologists treat our patients, and understanding their mental health journey, and trying to understand their pregnancy experience, and trying to alleviate some of the concerns that they have during the childbirth period. Now, I had a cesarean sections for both of my children. The second time round, when I had my Caesar, it was scheduled for I think 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I was moved up to the second case of the day instead of the first case of the day. But even that 45-minute wait, the level of anxiety created inside of me. By the time I went into theater, I was anxious, I was nervous. And it wasn't, it also had to do with the fact that my primary research was on cesarean sections and women who were dying during cesarean sections. So I walked in with anxiety from all the knowledge and experience that I had. But no one asked the questions, are you fine? Are you ready? Are you anxious? Is there anything I can do for you? So it for me, it was just that eye opener that, there's a real human side to what patients experience, to what women experience. And so one of my key clinical interests is maternal mental health. That's really been what I think is part of my contribution and what I want to build on in the medical field. Just that sensitivity around how do we prepare women for childbirth, for the pregnancy experience, and for when things go wrong, because a lot of women remain with depression, with scars, with anxiety, with all sorts of things afterwards that no one paid attention to. No one asked afterwards, are you fine? So it's important that we start looking into those things and looking at the human aspects of the care that we give. And of course, to you being, talking about the role of the father, I think that's even a further neglected space, because, the the pregnancy consultations are usually just about the mom. They're not about the father, the family. And I have seen men who have experienced depression, after a loss of a child, when the wife did not experience it. And it's only when you start asking those questions and treating them as a family, as a pair, as a unit, the younger sister, or I mean the older sister who has been affected by this pregnancy, has anyone stopped to say, you knew that a baby was coming, your mother was going to bring a baby home, this baby did not come home because things did not go well? Did anyone did anyone ask, how the siblings are, how this is affecting the siblings? And so those are my interests and the kind of work that I like to engage in.
I'm actually glad to hear that, because I think for me that's one of the real things that I thought we should actually try and discuss on this show, because now you talking about these things, the mental aspect of things, that really, we've looked at the scientific, how's the baby growing, is the baby having enough, is the head big enough, etc., and all those scientific things that come and concern, the gynae when they look at you, but not really bother about, did you come in with somebody? Do you have somebody by your side? Do you have somebody that you can talk to? Do you have, etc. And so for me, I'm looking at you. You are now looking at this thing. You're looking for research. You're looking for all of this material that will kind of inform that particular angle of the pregnancy and, of course, the birth process. And you are at the same time raising two boys who one day, of course, we hope will get married and have, lots of children to make you a grandma at some point in time. What do you think thus far you've picked up that, this is one thing that I need to tell my sons when they need to look out for, or they need to do when their wives fall pregnant?
Yeah, I think it's and again, like, I don't have a better way of explaining it, but about being human, about the whole process, and it's understanding that their anxieties, their fears, and it's those conversations that don't feel comfortable, but we need to have those conversations because things don't always go right, so things don't always go as expected, and raising a community that is aware and sensitive to just the human side of things. And I would want my sons to understand that the woman, or the role of the woman, is not just to put food on your table, but you've got an individual, a human being who's got great potential that you can nurture, that you can support, and that you can walk this life journey with, and I think it's those things. I think more than anything, what I've tried to do with my family is, let's walk this journey together. So my sons are very aware of what I do when I get an achievement, when I don't get when things go wrong. I keep them in the loop because I feel we are running this journey together as a family. And, when one celebrates, I'm celebrating with them. I'm telling the world, you did this, you did well, I'm with you. When you're having a bad day, I'm there for you and there to make life easier for you. And I want them to just understand the human concept of life versus the role separation and what's expected of each person.
And I think you've traveled the world. You've seen as many airports. You've been in so many planes thus far. And I think one thing that potentially might be a bit of a discouraging thing is when you fly back home and you hear that teenage pregnancies, for example, in this country, I think the last stats I saw were almost like 60,000 schoolgirls in 2017 to 2018 that kind of fell pregnant whilst in school. Now, I'm talking of a pregnancy setup where we are speaking in a familial space, where there's a husband, there's, like you're saying, siblings potentially that are waiting for this child to come through. And how much worse does it become then for kids who are still kids themselves and then fall pregnant and have to go through this entire process? How does that affect, I would assume, their mental faculties, as they go through such a process?
And so I've always found from I used to run a mental health clinic in Johannesburg. And I mean, we used to run a teenage, we used to spend time with the teenage pregnancies, with the girls that have experienced teenage pregnancy. And the question that people often don't ask is who impregnated you, or what were the circumstances? There's an assumption that these girls wanted, were naughty and fell pregnant, or were doing something that would have resulted in that. And the more time we've spent with these girls, you find that one, there's a trigger. Some of them were already in a place where they were depressed and having their own issues with life that led to this. So it was their way of running away from the issues that they were experiencing and finding a place of solace, or whatever you want to call it. These may be issues, parents divorce, experiencing, violence and all of this. So children experience things that affect their mental health, and some of them will experiment and do all sorts of other things, looking for solace, or looking for whatever they're looking for. Then they're the ones that develop depression because, of being pregnant, and the disappointment that they have to face from the world, now that they are pregnant, their parents, etc., the people around them. And so for me, it was really, it's really understanding that we don't always understand what's going on. We can assume that these are teenagers that just, I don't know, judge them and all of that. But when you start treating them as individuals and going into their individual stories, a lot of them are crying out for help. And as healthcare workers, as human beings, we should realize this. And a lot of them experience gender-based violence, and it's not easy for them to stand up and say this. And some are covering up for relatives that may have abused them sexually, etc. So I think it's important to not walk around with a judgmental mindset, but to rather be supportive and try to understand where and how can we help you. Take me through your journey, and let's see what could have been done, or if anything could have been done differently, or if there are perpetrators that need to be called out. It's not only the teenage girl that called this upon herself. There's a lot of history and baggage that needs to be addressed, and we should be helping those girls rather than judging them and victimizing them ourselves.
And the way you speak about this passionately, and the way clearly, as you say, you've also worked with girls in this particular, it kind of says to me, why aren't more doctors like you? Because I'm sure you've heard stories where these teenage girls, especially in public hospitals, when they go there, they are made fun of, they're humiliated, even if they were going to ask for an abortion, for example. Is it something perhaps that we should be looking at in terms of our doctors going forward, getting some sort of societal training, not to obviously make them social workers, but to get that sort of sensitivity that you are dealing with children, dealing with issues, you're dealing with people, and not just patients who don't have a name.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that there are a lot of doctors who are like me, who are passionate about these things, and who are doing this on a daily basis and running these clinics and making time. And then there are those who just don't understand. And it's because of our medical training sometimes doesn't cover all of these aspects. Some of these issues, some of us are only starting now to, there's a textbook chapter that I've written on this, which will be published soon. So these things are not, some of us were not taught these things in medical school. These things are only starting to come out now. So, back to the issue of compassion and trying to some things that I didn't experience as a patient myself. I understand that, okay, maybe my doctor didn't know better, but of course there are those blatant examples where, we can all say, but you should have and could have done better than this, but I'm just, there are there are a lot of people like me in the system, and I think we want more people to be compassionate and to continue to continue with this.
And would you say, in your opinion, that potentially the academic world is sensitive to accepting such change and changing the curriculum to kind of fit this social aspect, or is it literally just we are wasting time? Let's deal with the issues.
I think things will change. In some places, things are slowly changing. I think a lot of how the medical curriculum has been taught is in a sense a bit of this hierarchical, patriarchal, bullying kind of culture per se. And you experience a lot of negativity, a lot of you're not good enough type of culture in the medical schools. And many of us now are trying to be different and to teach differently, and saying that you don't have to be harsh, to teach. Teaching is not, we need to rethink and change the teaching philosophy. So many of us are starting to advocate for that. And so I'm hoping that things will change, but I'm very aware that in many places, things are not being taught like that. And unfortunately, if you're taught in a system where, your professor shouts at you and chances are you are going to shout at your patients, because they're the only person that you can shout at in this toxic environment. And so I'm very aware of the negativity and the toxic cultures that drive some of this. But things have to change. We can't leave it the way it is. We need to rethink how we train, how we teach, culture, the culture that we create in our hospitals and in our wards.
And with that, and I'm just trying to think now, do you not struggle to carry that load that you see at work back home? You have to sign all these death certificates, you have to do all of these certifications and explain to these parents and see the emotions as they break down. As how do you clinically live the work life at work, to get home to your husband as a happy wife and a happy mother? Is it even possible?
Well, I'll be honest that, and I think my career has gone through different phases. There was the phase where I was purely, I'm the doctor on call, I'm there, and it was all about the clinical work that I'm doing. And if you lose one patient, you go home, you cry. It's painful, it's heavy. It's not simply, oh, let's go back tomorrow. And you need to come home to a home that is going to understand that you had a tough day at work and you're emotional and you're upset that things didn't go the way you were hoping they'd go. But then I've also gone through the research journey where you are going through files of patients and you are starting to understand what went wrong across populations. And it's not, and that is, for me, I found that more heavy, when I look at what is happening when I looked at what's happening in patients across Gauteng, what's happening in the 15 hospitals, and comparing the different hospitals. And then you look at what's happening across African countries and seeing these adverse outcomes. I think that is, for me, I found that more heavy than looking at the one day at a time in my ward. But all of this has brought me to where I am now and has been part of this journey. And I think it's the two patients I think I lost in Greytown when I was doing my community service that constantly keep me going. You use some of that pain to craft your story and to say, I don't want patients to die in my hands, at least those that can be prevented. I don't want other women like me to face these things. And so I'm gonna be an advocate for change, and that's what I do for a living.
We're thankful. We're thankful for Greytown. It was pretty much your Damascus Road moment, I see. And there's another doctor who's just commented here on social media. He says, you guys are taught to deal with all the patients, the different kinds, of course, the ethical pillars, confidentiality, autonomy, non-maleficence. Okay, he's from Kenya, so he uses big English. And beneficence. I'll have to Google that. The issue comes in when healthcare workforce are burnt out and have empathy fatigue. Is it something that you actually relate with, as this doctor is saying here?
Yeah, but I relate completely. And I recently gave a talk on respectful maternal care. And addressed some of these issues that, who's caring for the carers and how are we caring for the carers? Working in a toxic environment and creating a place where people do not feel looked after, cared for, paid enough, getting enough in terms of their salaries, where people are being shouted at themselves on a daily basis, those are leadership issues, and so medical leadership needs to be taught as well. It's not enough to say, we're seeing 500 patients here. You can see 500 patients in an environment that is warm, loving, where we all friends with each other, where we're excited to work with each other, and where there is a culture that allows us to where we're not all burnt out, basically. And I've experienced that where, my early days in Baragwanath Hospital, I mean, we knew you're on call every 4 nights. You knew you're looking after 20 women in labor. It was hard, but there was a time where it was exciting to be in that space where we worked so well as a team, and you enjoyed being in that space. But I've also worked in toxic environments where it's shouting, everyone is shouting at each other, and it, and those are leadership issues that I think managers, CEOs, heads of departments, professors, etc. Some of these things can be taught. It's not only about the number of patients we see, but it's the kind of culture we create in the departments that we run.
I'm glad, and I think I see my clock has run out here. We've just promised our people 30 minutes, and before we run to do more important research, I just have one final question for you, that I kind of ask people every time they come on this show, and that would be, if you had this stage, Prof Maswime, this stage and this video went so viral that everybody in the world was going to see it, what's the one message that you'd want to leave with everybody out there?
My one message is always it's consistent. It's encouraging people to find their passions, the things that they are good at, the things that they strongly believe in, their convictions, and to follow them and to make those things happen, and to not be held back. So to do those things that we believe we meant to do in life, and to believe in the things that we truly believe in, and follow our convictions, and be part of changing the world in any small way that we can.
Change the world, change the world. You've heard it for yourself from Prof Maswime. Thank you very much for really gracing us our show, giving us your time. We know you've got very, very important things to do in terms of changing the world there, and I think we really honor and appreciate, having you today. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Right, and it's a good evening to everybody out there then. Thank you for tuning in, and until we see you next time on another episode of Live Chats on Monday, this is Ronald Muringai, your host, signing out. Good evening.